Hi, my name is Alex and this workshop is brought to you by Ethical Health Solutions, where healthcare solutions are ethically crafted. Hello, we are now in part 7 of Exploring Healthcare Ethics, a workshop for healthcare professionals. In today's workshop, we will discuss professional boundaries and conflicts of interest in healthcare. Then, we'll examine ethical guidelines surrounding professional relationships, explore case scenarios involving conflicts of interest, and discuss strategies for maintaining ethical conduct in professional practice. Ethical guidelines on professional boundaries. Definition. Professional boundaries in healthcare refer to the limits that healthcare providers establish to maintain appropriate and ethical relationships with patients, colleagues, and other stakeholders. These boundaries are essential to protect both the healthcare provider and the patient, ensuring a professional and therapeutic relationship. Importance. Ethical guidelines on professional boundaries are crucial for several reasons. Upholding trust. Trust is fundamental in the healthcare provider-patient relationship. Patients need to feel safe and confident that their healthcare providers are acting in their best interests. Clear boundaries help in building and maintaining this trust. Maintaining objectivity. Healthcare providers must remain objective to provide the best possible care. Professional boundaries prevent personal feelings or relationships from interfering with clinical judgment and decision-making. Prioritizing patient welfare. The primary focus of healthcare providers should be the welfare of their patients. Boundaries ensure that personal interests or external influences do not compromise patient care. Preventing exploitation. Power dynamics in healthcare can make patients vulnerable. Ethical boundaries protect patients from potential exploitation or harm, whether intentional or unintentional, by healthcare providers. Avoiding conflicts of interest. Boundaries help in identifying and managing conflicts of interest. For example, a healthcare provider should not have a financial interest in the treatments they recommend to patients, as this could influence their clinical decisions. Key components of ethical guidelines on professional boundaries. Clear communication. Healthcare providers should communicate clearly and professionally with patients, explaining the nature and limits of the professional relationship. Respect for privacy and confidentiality. Maintaining patient confidentiality is paramount. Boundaries help ensure that patient information is protected and only shared with those directly involved in their care. Appropriate physical contact. Physical contact should be appropriate and limited to what is necessary for the patient's care. Providers should always obtain informed consent before conducting physical examinations or procedures. Emotional boundaries. While it's important to show empathy and compassion, healthcare providers should maintain emotional boundaries to prevent becoming overly involved in a patient's personal life or problems. Professional relationships. Relationships with colleagues and other stakeholders should also be governed by professional boundaries to ensure a respectful and collaborative work environment. Challenges and strategies. Navigating dual relationships. Healthcare providers may find themselves in dual relationships, where they have another significant connection to the patient outside of the professional context. Strategies to manage this include setting clear boundaries and seeking supervision or guidance when necessary. Responding to boundary crossings. Sometimes, boundaries might be unintentionally crossed. It's important for healthcare providers to recognize these situations, address them promptly, and take corrective actions to restore appropriate boundaries. Ongoing education and training. Continuous education and training on professional boundaries and ethics help healthcare providers stay informed about best practices and emerging challenges in maintaining these boundaries. Institutional policies and support. Healthcare institutions should have clear policies regarding professional boundaries and provide support systems, such as ethics committees or counseling services, to assist healthcare providers in managing boundary issues. By adhering to ethical guidelines on professional boundaries, healthcare providers can ensure that their relationships with patients and colleagues remain professional, respectful, and focused on the best interests of the patients. Now that we know all the ethical guidelines and their definitions, let's move on to case studies. Case Scenario 1. Dual relationships. Scenario. A healthcare provider develops a personal relationship with a patient outside of the professional setting, blurring the boundaries between their professional and personal roles. Ethical consideration. Recognizing and addressing the potential conflicts of interest and boundary violations inherent in dual relationships. I will give everyone a few moments to think about possible considerations to apply. Up. Let's start the discussion. Here's the scenario again. Scenario. A healthcare provider develops a personal relationship with a patient outside of the professional setting, blurring the boundaries between their professional and personal roles. This situation can arise in various forms, such as socializing with the patient, forming a romantic relationship, or engaging in business dealings. Ethical consideration. Recognizing and addressing the potential conflicts of interest and boundary violations inherent in dual relationships is crucial for maintaining professional integrity and patient trust. Conflicts of interest. Definition. A conflict of interest occurs when the healthcare provider's personal interests could potentially influence their professional judgment or actions. Example. If a healthcare provider is romantically involved with a patient, their ability to make objective clinical decisions may be compromised by their personal feelings. Boundary violations. Definition. Boundary violations occur when the professional lines between a healthcare provider and a patient are crossed, leading to potential exploitation or harm to the patient. Example. Engaging in a business relationship with a patient may lead to the patient feeling coerced or obligated, which undermines the provider's duty to act in the patient's best interest. Addressing dual relationships. Recognizing the issue. Healthcare providers must be aware of the potential for dual relationships and the ethical issues they pose. Self-awareness and reflective practice are essential in identifying when boundaries are at risk of being crossed. Setting clear boundaries. Providers should establish and communicate clear boundaries with patients. This includes explaining the limits of the professional relationship and avoiding situations where personal and professional roles might overlap. Seeking guidance. When a dual relationship is identified, healthcare providers should seek guidance from supervisors, ethics committees, or professional organizations. Consulting with colleagues or mentors can provide objective perspectives and support in handling the situation. Terminating the professional relationship. In some cases, it may be necessary to transfer the care of the patient to another provider to maintain professional integrity and protect the patient's welfare. This step should be taken with sensitivity and in the patient's best interest. Documentation. Keeping detailed records of interactions and decisions regarding boundary issues is important. This documentation can provide a clear account of actions taken to address dual relationship concerns and protect both the provider and patient. Education and training. Education and training. Ongoing education on ethics and professional boundaries helps healthcare providers stay informed about best practices and reinforces the importance of maintaining clear boundaries. Example of an ethical dilemma. A psychologist begins to develop feelings for a patient. Recognizing the potential for a dual relationship, the psychologist discusses the situation with a supervisor. Together, they decide that the best course of action is to refer the patient to another psychologist to avoid any boundary violations and ensure that the patient receives objective and unbiased care. By understanding and managing dual relationships, healthcare providers can uphold ethical standards, protect patient welfare, and maintain the trust and integrity of the healthcare profession. Let's move on to case scenario 2, financial incentives. Scenario. A pharmaceutical company offers financial incentives to healthcare providers for prescribing their medications, potentially influencing prescribing practices. Ethical consideration. Identifying and mitigating conflicts of interest that may arise from financial relationships with industry stakeholders. I will give everyone a few moments to think about possible considerations to apply. Up. Let's start the discussion. Let's get back to the scenario. A pharmaceutical company offers financial incentives to healthcare providers for prescribing their medications. These incentives can come in various forms, such as bonuses, gifts, speaking fees, or funding for research. The intention behind these incentives is to promote the use of the company's products, but they can potentially influence the prescribing practices of healthcare providers. Ethical consideration. Identifying and mitigating conflicts of interest that may arise from financial relationships with industry stakeholders is essential to maintaining professional integrity and prioritizing patient welfare. Conflicts of interest. Definition. A conflict of interest occurs when a healthcare provider's personal or financial interests have the potential to influence their professional judgment or actions. Example. Accepting financial incentives from a pharmaceutical company may lead a healthcare provider to favor prescribing that company's medications, regardless of whether they are the best choice for the patient. Impact on patient care. Financial incentives can undermine the trust patients place in their healthcare providers. If patients become aware of these incentives, they might question whether their care decisions are being made based on clinical evidence or financial gain. Addressing financial incentives. Transparency. Healthcare providers should disclose any financial relationships with pharmaceutical companies or other industry stakeholders. Transparency helps in maintaining trust and allows patients and colleagues to be aware of potential conflicts of interest. Adherence to ethical guidelines. Professional organizations and healthcare institutions often have ethical guidelines and policies regarding financial relationships with industry stakeholders. Providers should familiarize themselves with these guidelines and adhere to them strictly. Objective decision-making. Clinical decisions should be based solely on the best available evidence and the individual needs of the patient. Healthcare providers should critically evaluate the efficacy and safety of medications independently of any financial incentives. Alternative funding sources. Seeking funding from unbiased sources, such as government grants or nonprofit organizations, can help mitigate the influence of industry stakeholders on research and clinical practices. Institutional policies. Healthcare institutions should implement clear policies regarding the acceptance of financial incentives. These policies might include restrictions on accepting gifts, mandatory disclosure of financial relationships, and regular audits. Example of an ethical dilemma. A cardiologist is offered a substantial speaking fee by a pharmaceutical company to promote a new heart medication. The cardiologist recognizes that accepting this fee might influence their prescribing habits. To avoid a conflict of interest, the cardiologist decides to decline the offer and instead focuses on prescribing medications based on clinical evidence and patient needs. By recognizing and addressing the ethical considerations associated with financial incentives, healthcare providers can ensure that their prescribing practices remain objective, evidence-based, and centered on the best interests of their patients. This approach helps to uphold the integrity of the healthcare profession and maintain public trust. That was our last case. I hope you folks are still with me. Now, let's move on to strategies for maintaining ethical conduct. Establish clear policies. Healthcare organizations should establish clear policies and guidelines regarding professional boundaries, conflicts of interest, and ethical conduct. Continuing education. Healthcare providers should engage in ongoing education and training on ethical principles, professional standards, and legal regulations. Supervision and support. Supervisors and colleagues should provide guidance, support, and oversight to help healthcare providers navigate ethical dilemmas and maintain integrity in their practice. I will give everyone a few moments to think about possible considerations to apply. Let's start the discussion. Strategies for maintaining ethical conduct. Maintaining ethical conduct in healthcare is essential for ensuring that patient care is fair, transparent, and focused on the well-being of patients. Here are some key strategies for healthcare organizations and providers to uphold high ethical standards. 1. Establish clear policies. Healthcare organizations should develop and implement comprehensive policies and guidelines to address various aspects of ethical conduct. Professional boundaries. Definition. Policies should clearly define appropriate professional boundaries between healthcare providers and patients to prevent boundary violations and dual relationships. Example. Policies might specify that personal relationships with patients outside of the professional context are not permitted. Conflicts of interest. Definition. Clear guidelines should outline what constitutes a conflict of interest and how to manage such situations. Example. Policies might require disclosure of financial relationships with pharmaceutical companies and prohibit acceptance of significant gifts. Ethical conduct. Definition. General ethical guidelines should cover principles of honesty, integrity, confidentiality, and respect for patients and colleagues. Example. A code of ethics might emphasize the importance of informed consent and patient autonomy. 2. Continuing education. Ongoing education is critical for keeping healthcare providers informed about evolving ethical standards, legal regulations, and professional expectations. Ethical principles. Definition. Education should reinforce core ethical principles such as beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, and justice. Example. Training programs might include case studies and discussions on how to apply these principles in clinical practice. Professional standards. Definition. Providers should stay updated on the standards set by professional organizations and regulatory bodies. Example. Regular workshops and seminars can help providers understand and adhere to the latest standards of care. Legal regulations. Definition. Education should include information on relevant laws and regulations that impact healthcare practice. Example. Providers might receive training on patient privacy laws such as HIPAA in the United States. Supervision and support. Effective supervision and support systems are vital for helping healthcare providers navigate ethical dilemmas and maintain professional integrity. Guidance from supervisors. Definition. Supervisors should offer regular oversight and feedback to ensure that ethical guidelines are followed. Example. Supervisors can conduct regular meetings to discuss ethical issues and provide advice on complex cases. Peer support. Definition. Colleagues should support each other in maintaining ethical standards through open communication and collaboration. Example. Peer review sessions can provide a platform for discussing challenging cases and sharing best practices. Ethics committees. Definition. Establishing ethics committees can provide a formal mechanism for addressing ethical concerns and dilemmas. Example. When a provider faces an ethical dilemma, they can consult the ethics committee for guidance and recommendations. Example of applying these strategies. Scenario. A healthcare provider is offered a significant gift by a grateful patient. The provider feels uncomfortable but is unsure how to proceed. Clear policies. The provider refers to the organization's policy on gifts, which clearly states that significant gifts should not be accepted. Continuing education. The provider recalls training on professional boundaries and conflicts of interest, reinforcing the importance of declining the gift. Supervision and support. The provider discusses the situation with their supervisor, who offers support and suggests thanking the patient and explaining the policy on gifts. By establishing clear policies, engaging in continuing education, and providing supervision and support, healthcare organizations and providers can maintain high ethical standards, fostering trust and integrity in the patient-provider relationship. Now, let's practice cultivating self-awareness. Reflect on your own values, beliefs, and motivations in relation to professional boundaries and conflicts of interest. Consider how personal biases and external influences may impact your decision-making and behavior in professional settings. In examining professional boundaries and conflicts of interest in healthcare, we recognize the critical importance of adhering to ethical guidelines to maintain trust, objectivity, and patient welfare. Professional boundaries define the limits within which healthcare providers should operate to preserve the integrity of the therapeutic relationship and avoid dual relationships, financial conflicts, and undue influence from external stakeholders. By understanding and respecting these boundaries, healthcare professionals can ensure that their interactions with patients, colleagues, and industry partners are ethical and centered on the best interests of those they serve. Through various case scenarios, such as dual relationships, financial incentives, and gifts and gratuities, we see the complex ethical challenges that can arise in healthcare practice. Each scenario highlights the need for healthcare providers to be vigilant and proactive in recognizing and addressing potential conflicts of interest and ethical breaches. By establishing clear policies, engaging in continuing education, and fostering a supportive environment for supervision and peer collaboration, healthcare organizations can equip their providers with the tools and knowledge necessary to navigate these challenges effectively. Cultivating self-awareness and reflecting on personal values and biases further strengthens the commitment to ethical conduct, ensuring that healthcare providers consistently uphold the highest standards of professional integrity. This is where this part ends. Please proceed to the next part and don't forget to share your thoughts with us. Leave a comment below or send us an email at info@ethical-healthsolutions.com with the subject line, feedback. Thank you. Alright, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button to receive notifications for new videos from us. Goodbye.